everyone. This is Liya here. Welcome to the NB Summit and the Acknowledge panel. For those of you who don't know me, I am the co-founder of West by East and a political consultant. And today I have here with me the three amazing ladies that I have long admired and look up to. So we have Honorable Juli Mathew, who is the presiding judge of Fort Bend County. We have Dr. Sonia Koshy, who is the Director of Measurement, Evaluation, and Learning for the Kapor Center. So she has a lot of responsibilities. And then finally, but definitely not least, we have Rebekah James Lovett. She's the co-founder of Revive Kombucha, and she also would like me to let you know she's the Maharani of Sonoma County, California. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope everyone is well. So let's get right into it. Just to give you a little background of why I'm going to ask this question is I've been in the political space back since 2016, and I've been a campaign operative and organizer for most of it. And I've recently just taken on a campaign manager position, which I've always run campaigns, but I've always had a team. There was always a lot of support. And in the space that I'm in, I'm usually the only woman, and I'm definitely the only woman of color. So I constantly find myself like doubting my instincts and my ability to do the job. I'm sort of faced with like, did I make the right decision? And I'm like a little bit floundering sometimes. And, I've recently realized it is imposter syndrome, which I'm sure all of you have experienced at some point. So I would love to get your insight on how you've handled imposter syndrome in your respective fields. Whoever would like to go first.
I'll go. So I don't think it's foreign that, in our culture, kind of being the quiet helper is, kind of what we're conditioned to do, or the examples that we've seen. I know, whenever I've been direct or I guess more forceful in what I want, I've always heard you're so intense, or as a little girl you're so bossy, versus speaking to that in an affirming way. And I know for a majority of my adult life, I've always kind of had that inner critic, like, kind of stay in your lane and, wait, and just waiting for someone to give me license to do it. And I've always kicked myself looking back, like, why didn't I knew this thing, I knew that was wrong, or I saw this thing and I didn't say it because I was so preoccupied with not wanting to be perceived as something I don't know. So I'm 40 now, and I can say, like, I wish I just acted on my instincts, right? Because I'm a thoughtful person, I'm intelligent, and it's okay to say that. It doesn't mean that you are stuck up or you're big-headed. It just means you're aware, and that's a gift, right? And there's certain things that I notice that other people don't. And I think when you're an introvert, you do spend a lot of time kind of observing the room and taking note of things. And so when you do sense that something is right or wrong, more often than not, you're onto something. So I think, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's just to speak to not doubting yourself. And, I think encouragement is so underrated. We tend to be very critical of ourselves. And I think, I try to do that with my girls when I see things of value in them, is just to like let them know, like, I see that's really good, and you should continue to do that. And it means so much to them because it just encourages them to take more and more risks.
I love what you said about, just the encouragement aspect of it, because I think it's like sometimes you have to be your own encouragement, and we're not really taught to do that from a very young age, and it's just something you have to figure out as an adult to like, oh, okay, you have to like push yourself. But yeah, there's been so many times where I'm in a meeting and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. And I'll just be like, well, if someone else had the same idea, they would have said it. So maybe there's not, any validity to what I'm thinking. So I won't speak on it. And then 5 days later, exactly what I thought was going to happen will happen. And then we have to reconvene. So it is a lot of breaking bad habits, I found. But Dr. Sonia, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I spent my inner monologue just agreeing and nodding with what Rebekah just said, because that's what I do a lot in terms of, let me listen to what everyone else thinks. And then maybe if no one else thinks what I'm thinking, I might go and put in my voice. But everyone else's voice is so much more important, and everyone else has so much more experience than what I could bring to the table. And so I found myself, now that I'm in this new role at the Kapor Center, being like, well, I'm kind of leading. I now have to put myself forward as someone who has a certain level of expertise, by way of them actually acknowledging that I'm a director level. So I think that for me, it is a lot of just say it. The worst that can happen is that it's wrong or people disagree with me, but at least I've put it out there and we can have a conversation. And if I'm wrong, at least that I'll be able to learn something from that feedback of why my position isn't being taken or my voice isn't being heard in a particular direction. So it's really about, again, what Liya just said about breaking that bad habit of not being wrong ever, and actually being like, I I need to learn from that, and this can be a learning experience, versus I have to be the expert. I have to know everything about everything. So let's just get away from that, because I think that's also a little bit of the immigrant Malayali voice in me of, you always have to be on your best behavior. You can't show any sort of fault or flaw. And it's really about saying that as humans, we have flaws. And the more time we spend hiding that, it is exhausting. And that's where the burnout comes from, of being everything to everyone and just being in a space to say that I need help, I need feedback, I need someone else on my team to push us forward. And so that's also just a life lesson that I've had to learn.
Yeah, I hear you. What about you, Judge Mathew? How do you feel that in the courtroom at all?
So I handle a general jurisdiction court, which means we handle criminal, probate, civil cases, juvenile cases, and mental health issues. So it's a lot of different things, and there is no way to be an expert on any of those, all of those topics for that matter. So there are definitely times I have to step back and look at case law or read or figure it out myself. So even if I don't know, I'm not sure if it's an imposter syndrome, but the fact I'm okay to acknowledge that I don't know. I'm okay to acknowledge that that everything's not um, my expertise. So I think it's okay, even if you're not uh, good at something, or if you don't know something, to be able to step back and find the time or do the research that's needed to make sure that you know what you're talking about. Um, and so I think, when I was running, there were those insecurities that Rebekah mentioned earlier that I had, whether am I good enough for this position? But regardless of those things, as I mentioned earlier, I've been very bold in just taking steps. And I think that's one of my positive attributes, is that if I want something, I usually do not think of some of the other consequences, and that may be my negative, but I just jump in it.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting to hear as well. Like that's a great attitude to have as well. And this kind of brings me to another thought I was having. So, I feel like I especially, and I know you guys do as well, we encourage other women to pursue leadership roles and take, ownership of whatever it is that they have an interest in doing. But I feel sometimes that we don't, especially I find myself doing this a lot, where you don't really talk about what happens when you are the leader, like when you are the head of the team, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh, like I am the leader. Like there's another flip side to that when you reach that point of like, oh, so I have to figure out what's gonna happen now. Like I didn't realize that there was this part. Like it's all like, I feel like sometimes we talk about the glamorous side of leadership, but I'd really like to talk about the struggles of it. And just for me personally, like navigating a startup in COVID, especially half of our team and everyone lives in India and works in India, and we employ a bunch of folks there, and the lockdown really affected them. And we had to figure out how to make sure that they didn't really suffer during that time period. And it was just one of those really tense couple of months of like, oh, like we just got to figure it out. And like they're looking to you for a solution because that's your role. You are their boss, and they come to you being like, okay, well, what's the plan, Sam? And you're like, I will figure it out. So have you guys like, how did you kind of navigate those troubling moments of leadership? Dr. Sonia?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, this speaks to the imposter syndrome as well, in terms of there's a lot of inner monologue that goes in my head at all times of the day of what am I doing? Is this a decision I'm making, or should I bring someone else in? And I think again, it's about being able to learn that this year of really being like, no, you're actually the adult in the room now, and so you have to make the decision. And having that kind of psyching up moment of saying you're just as qualified as anyone to make a decision. And so I think that this year in particular, again, in the workplace in general, it's just been a lot of burnout because there's this intersection of work and life, and there's no such thing as work-life balance at all. And so it's really been about stepping up as what does productivity look like even, and being able to manage what my those that I supervise are expected to do in this moment in time, and being able to be level set with people on more of a human level. And I think that that's something that I've had to just grapple with. I can't just be this workhorse all year with all of these psychological and mental things that also go into being in this moment in time of a pandemic. And so I think it's really just been about understanding myself, and also saying that I need to make decisions based on a personal level more so than just a professional or productivity level, and being able to shift our focus, shift our goals, and align with what I think is best for everyone involved.
I hear you on that. That's a really important point. Like understanding what is the most beneficial thing for your team and judging it by productivity is actually quite brilliant. I will be stealing that. Judge Mathew?
So in regard to being at the head, sometimes it's hard because if you want to run something by somebody, you're it sometimes. There's nobody to consult with. And there are other judges that I have called and asked their opinions, but at the same time, in that regard, I miss being able to, when I was an attorney in a firm, I had other attorneys to consult or other attorneys to talk to who are on the same level. But being a judge, it's a little bit difficult to be able to, communicate with, even with other judges. They have hectic schedules just like yourself. And one of the things a friend of mine who's also a judge now told me is that being a judge, you're going to be lonely. It's a lonely place. And it's very much true. Being in leadership, I think it can tend to get lonely because you're at the top. And so it's something I think getting used to.
Yeah, no, that's loneliness is probably the one thing a lot of people don't talk about. It's like I'm lucky to have a co-founder, so we can constantly bounce off of each other. But there is this sense of loneliness because it's like, who else can you speak to about the things that you're going through? Becky, you and your husband run Revive Kombucha. So how is it for you in your experience? Is there a lot of like marital spats? Like if you guys had like a bad day, do you bring it to the office?
Oh my goodness. I'm so grateful that my husband and I were together like 8 years before we started the company, because there was a time when we had time for each other, right? And that really carried us in the years where we couldn't have time for each other because there's nothing glamorous about a startup. It's so funny, like you see on like Instagram, people are like, I'm a boss and I'm like an entrepreneur. Like that is not the life that I'm living. Like, it is a grind. It is a struggle. It is isolating. And, I'm from Chicago. We moved out here 11 years ago to start the company, and to not have the support system, right there, was hard, because, people have a lot of expectations. When you're founders, they expect you to know everything, and then everything you do wrong is amplified and magnified, and so it's like, yeah, who do you get to go and talk to? Because that's it, you're it, right? But I think you asked previously, Liya, like, what do you do to kind of like recalibrate in those moments? And I just want to like lift up my cousin Anit, who as well, and she knows me, and she's known me my whole life, and she's seen where I've been and where I am today. And like, you just need that person who's like gassing you up and like reminds you who you are and like where you came from. And she's like my like confidant and advisor. And it's just like, again, it's so underrated, but like having that person who's like, I know you can do this, I see what you're doing, and like, yeah, this sucks right now, but like, what you're doing is like amazing or whatever, and the thing is like, you go through so many hard times, so it's like you really have to want to do it, to choose this path, because you're not going to have people congratulating you along the way. It's like we've been faced with like, possibly having to close the business, and like, it's always, you're just going through these things as a business owner. There's no safety net, but I wouldn't trade it either, because in this journey, I've really gotten to use a lot of the things that I'm good at, and work with really amazing people. And, all of those things don't come easily. Right. And it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm choosing this path, and I'm willing to take what comes with it along the way. And just as far as leadership in general, there's a huge shift from going from working and being responsible merely for your output, and then having to be responsible for others. And that was difficult for me. I remember like in Whole Foods, like that was my first leadership position. And I would just go and sit in my car on my lunch break and like literally read my Bible, because that was the only thing that got me through the day. Because, you had employees that like hated your face, and like, it was just complete struggle mode, a department that's like underfunded, and they just magically want you to turn that around. And then in the midst of trying to figure out how to do that, someone on my team died unexpectedly. And in that moment, what my team needed from me was just to be a human being and show them that I cared about them. And that was like a huge shift in my thinking and leadership, because before you think, when I go to work, I need to be professional, I need to get my work done, and like nothing else. And here it's like, no, we're not going to get through this unless like you get involved with these people on a personal level and break down those barriers. And which was really uncomfortable for me to do, because being professional is my sweet spot, like to just be able to function there with some distance. But that wasn't going to work in this context. And it serves me well today to be able to do that with people, and to meet them where they're at. Because so many times, you can't compartmentalize your personal life and work, unfortunately. One seeps into the other. And not that you're making work a therapy session, but being able to like just be real with people and authentic with people is really, it's really great to be able to do that.
The empathy factor, I feel like that's just something women as leaders naturally are able to summon as well. My husband talks about this a lot. He's like, I just feel like women are better leaders. He's a recent feminist. It's a new thing for him. And it's because I strongly believe this, it's because of the empathy. Like you're able to understand and connect with people on an emotional level. But I also love the fact that you brought up Anith, because there's that saying, like, behind every man there's like a great man there's a woman. Like my interpretation of that is like, behind every great woman there's a group of girlfriends that constantly like gas her up, because without them we could not function. Like I have that sort of support system as well, and like every day if I don't get a message from them, it's like, you kind of lose your mind. So I wanted to ask this question that I've been asking a lot of women in my life. I recently entered my 30s, so it has made me a bit more nostalgic, because I'm just like thinking back a lot to my journey and where I am in life, which in many ways I'm very surprised by where I am in life. So I've been asking all of the women in my life, what would you tell your 16-year-old self? So I'm going to ask the three of you that, because it's a little bit more of a personal reason for me, because I really love how people reflect and introspect and how they sort of process their own journeys. So Judge Mathew, if you wouldn't mind being the first one to ask.
The 16-year-old me was pretty active. I played field hockey. I was all public in my high school. I was in the National Honor Society. I was first place in science. So 16-year-old me was out there doing exactly everything I needed to. The one in the 20s is where I felt like I could have made different choices. I could have gone down different paths. One of them is the fact that I was in law school in Delaware, and it was Senator Biden was just down the street from where I worked, and just to go knock on the door and say, can I volunteer at your office? Could have been, like those are things. I think in your 20s, in my 20s, I wish I was a little bit more focused and a little bit more disciplined, because it really took me until my late 30s to get back to that drive that I possibly had in high school.
Yeah, no, I get that. Oh, Dr. Sonia?
I think I would tell my 16-year-old self to not rush through getting to the next goal. I felt like I was so goal oriented of like what's next, that I missed so many opportunities of just being present and really being reflective of, is this the right decision for me? Does this make me happy? And is this what's going to carry me through? I think that I was just conditioned to be very linear. So it was high school, then it was college, then it was obviously going to be some sort of a graduate degree, and then get married. And so it just felt like there was always a goal that was that you had to get to. And I think that 16-year-old me was super stressed about that. And I think it would be important for her to know that life doesn't have to be linear, and also not to set yourself up to meet everyone else's standards, because like I said, there's always another goal. So after you get married, it's when's the first kid? And so it's always like, do what's good for you, and be reflective of that too, and be mindful, and think about what you're going to do and then pursue it.
Wonderful. Rebekah?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my 16-year-old self was not confident at all. I was painfully shy. And I think, not being good at like the things that most Indian kids are supposed to be good at made me question my own capabilities. And so, I would say for the things that you love to do, to continue to do them. So for me, it was writing. And it's like, just because you're not on the school newspaper, or you're not in the creative writing program, because I grew up in the Chicago public school system, which was totally underfunded, right? So you don't have these outlets to really flex your skills. And I think sometimes you think, I need to be doing something that's meaningful, and like that's how I should spend my time. And we don't put value in like just doing things that you love to do, because being engaged in things that you love to do unlocks other potential, right? So it's like, if you like to write, it's like, just write, because each time you're doing it, you're getting better, and you're getting better, and you're getting better. And creating, whether it's in an artistic way, like musically, or painting, or whatever the case may be, it's like, just continue that craft, because even if you don't grow up to be a musician, just doing those things that you love, and being passionate, and being engaged in the things that you're passionate about, just makes you overall better at the things that you do. So that's what I would say. And that's what I try to do with my girls now.
May I just add something?
Yeah.
So I just want to say, being in my 40s now, I am extremely comfortable in my skin. If I don't want to do something, I don't do it. I feel like I know myself more than I've ever known myself. And I'm confident in that because of all those experiences that I had when I was a teenager, when I was a young adult. And, you hit a point where you're like, I don't have to please anybody. I don't have to do it. I don't, you come to that self-realization, and it's amazing to be at a point like that.
Yeah. I loved all of your answers. And I think when I think back to my 16-year-old self, I completely connect with Dr. Sonia and Judge Mathew on this. I was incredibly goal-oriented, and I thought I had my entire life figured out. I mean, the level of confidence, it would stun you. Like, I was like, I knew that this is what was going to happen. And then in like 2 years, my entire trajectory changed. So I think the number one thing I would tell my 16-year-old self is like, girl, you don't got anything figured out. Like, wait till you see what's coming. But ladies, with that, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so illuminating, and I got some gems, which I thought I knew I was going to get anyways. But thank you so much, and thanks to Nexus for having us, and enjoy the next panels.